Good morning and good afternoon, everyone everywhere. Thank you so much for joining us in today's timely event that we are convening on the side of CPD 54 on an issue of great importance, which is entitled Responsive Policies to Low Fertility Experiences and Best Practices. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure, of course, to welcome you again to this timely event. I would like to express my gratitude to our partner, the Doha International Family Institute, Difi, represented, of course, today with us by Dr. Sharifa Al-Imadi, the Executive Director, for taking the initiative to organize this event. Our gratitude is also extended to our partners in UNFPA, represented today by Dr. Luay Shabana, for their cooperation and valuable presence and participation in this event. I would like to take this opportunity as well to commend the work and important contributions by Difi since its establishment in 2006 in developing scientifically based relevant policy research, which significantly contributed to advancing knowledge in the Arab region and promote evidence-based policies at the national, regional, and international levels. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our event today tackles a vital issue representing a great challenge to many countries around the world. The issue of low fertility is becoming a major concern for policymakers as it has direct impact on the demographic structure of the populations, the age structure, the working force, and the social security network. We are all aware that these aspects also have impact on countries' developments, economic growth, and prosperity. Therefore, this event is organized with the objective of initiating a discussion around the issue of low fertility for the purpose of identifying policies and best practices undertaken by countries and to come up with recommendations for policymaking. We look forward to hearing from our distinguished panel who are going to share their valuable experiences and some of the best practices in formulating and implementing responsive policies of low fertility. I look forward to of course, actively engaging today with all of you. And we're very much looking forward to a very rich discussion because we have an excellent panel that we all look forward to hearing from. And in this, and without delaying further, I would like to introduce, of course, Dr. Ramez.
Go ahead, Ramez.
Dr. Ramez, you can start. Can you hear us?
Dr. Ramez, can you hear us? I think we have a bit of difficulty. Dr. Ramez, can you hear us?
Dr. Ramez.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much if you can hear me. First of all, I would like to thank you for organizing this important event dedicated to such an important topic today about the low fertility, which is really taking place now in more and more countries. And we are seeing the effects of it both from the economic, social, and developmental perspectives. We have today a distinguished panel of experts who will be talking from various perspectives and from various angles about this important phenomena. And first, I would like to invite Dr. Sharifa Nawan Al-Madi, who is the executive director of the Doha International Family Institute, a member of the Qatar Foundation, a global and advocacy institute working to advance the knowledge of Arab families and promote evidence-based policies both in the Arab world and around the globe. Dr. Al-Madi was an executive director of international community relations, also at Nawabaf Health Center. She served in many different distinguished positions before, and she's a certified clinical psychologist. Dr. Sharifa, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramos. Thank you, Sheikh Alia. I will start my presentation, so I will share with you if you can see my presentation now. Yeah, on this. Thank you very much. Today, so we will try to present our finding and from our research in social aspect of fertility in Qatar. And I will try to give some introduction, a small introduction and study objectives. Then we'll talk about the methodology and primary result and some recommendation. So we know all that fertility, it's a big issue. Can you hear me, everyone? Yeah. Okay. We know that fertility it's an issue in Qatar, like in any other Arab Gulf state, especially. It is very important. While it's unlike most of the development country and some Arab countries, they limiting the population growth while we try to increase the population. And we can see the problem here from this chart that fertility rates declined from 5.3 in 1986 to 2.9 in 1970, which is an issue for us here in Qatar. So our study objective to identify the factors that affect the decline in fertility rates among the Qatari community, benchmark the international best practice in terms of policies and programs, suggest policies and programs that support raising the current fertility rate or at least shut down, stop their decline. The methodology, it's mixed method. We finish with the qualitative phase, which we will present the finding today. Still, we are working in quantitative phase in 2021, which inshallah we can present it next year in like this session. We work with semi-structure interview and with 58 Qataris, 30 female and 28 males. Also, beside the qualitative and quantitative finding, the study adopted secondary data analysis to examine all data related to fertility, like marriage and divorce, benchmark analysis to map the international best practice. We will try to give some primary results related to this qualitative interviews, and we will focus on different personal factors. We will see that most of the participants confirmed that there is a tendency toward limiting the number of children due to different reasons. Parenting responsibility, so now the responsibility is different. They think that equality is more important than quantity. Something is very important for them. So this limiting them to have more or higher number of children. Increases awareness and changes in perception. So the perception now is changed. They think that the bigger number of children, it's not what they want. It is like focusing on how to grow them up. So there is awarenesses in how to upbringing our children instead of having more number of children. Even women education and employment. We know that in Qatar now, women has a percentage of women who has higher education and finish their study and they looking for a successful career are high. So and in our culture, women are responsible about her children more than the father. So they think to have less children so they can finish their study and think more of their successful career. Also, fast this lifestyle and the lack of work-family balance policies which is like they focus too much in that, because they don't have the policies that will can let them to have balance between their work and their family life or with their children. The relationship between married couples also, an issue they raise it in our study here, because they think that when they don't feel safe in this relationship, they might come with a separation or divorce, and this will impact on their children. To having less children will protect them from different outcome of the divorce. Economic factors, cost of marriage, wedding, and a house. We know that in our culture, wedding is spending and wedding, and spending and the celebration of marriages take too much money for some people. So this is also stop them to get married when they are younger. So that will give them less opportunity to have more children. Also, cost of upbringing. Some of the participants, they raised this problem. Even some of them, they said already we have, especially with the health and the education. Even some participants said that we already have free medical and educational service in Qatar. The impact of increasing family income. Also, most of those who responded indicated that the effects is indirect, as increased income come with increased desire for luxuries, life, and these things. So with less children, it's give them more opportunities to spend in their luxury life. The impact of increases house space, or decreases house space. So they feel that the houses become smaller, so they have to have less children than so they can fit in the, even with the Qatari still there is land, and there is from the government they give them land and loan to build a big house for that, but they prefer to or some of the participants they mentioned that. Structure and contextual factors, globalization and value changes, reason of delayed marriage and its delaying relate to increases singlehood rates. So we, as a global, we can feel some of the young, they don't like to get married early because they want to live the freedom, lifestyle is changed. They prefer to live their life without responsibility, and they like this factor. It's mentioned too much in this research because they feel that this generation is different than some of the participant generation. Rate of divorce, as I said, is one of the big even issues, like the frequent answer, especially from the female participant, mentioned the woman's awarenesses and independence and her references. So they become aware more that they cannot live, forced to live a life they don't like, especially when they didn't choose their spouse. So they prefer to divorce, and this also creates another problem. Education factor, level of couples education and the number of children, most of the participants compared that the increased level of the couples education can influence limiting the number of children. I think this is also globally, it's not just in Qatar. Women education, employment status, and the fertility decisions. So several female and male participants linked women education and employment to the decision of having children. Also, wives higher education than husband. Some of them they mentioned that, but most of the participants they think no, this is not a reason. We can put it as a decreasing the fertility rates. Factors relate to work-family balance policies, and this they focus too much in work-family balance here, and the policies relate to the work-family balance, lack of adequate work-family policy, especially they mentioned that there is no policies to balance between the job and having children, and better work-family balance framework needed, like the participant suggested that extending the maternity leave, providing proper daycare, also flexible work arrangements. So different policies relate to work-family balance is very important. So that might increase their rate of having more children. And health factor, healthy lifestyle and fertility rates. So most of the health factor and lifestyle relate to the lifestyle in Qatar and the diet. So this might cause the diabetes, the rate of diabetes, even it's high in Qatar. So this lets the family not or the couples not have more than 2 to 3 children, and also the kind of food, the lack of food, lack of exercising, and the kind of unhealthy food that they taking. Also, biomedical treatment and the increases of genetic technology. Even one of participants said, I see a lot around me who had delays in having children, although the medicine has evolved. So there is something related to health, and we reached the Ministry of Health and this to help us in this research. So in the quantitative phase, we will focus more in health aspect, because many of the participants mention this factor. Also, fitness and outfit impact on reduction. So on another hand, findings show that women's interest in staying fit and shape may limit her a number of children she planned for. And gender preference and birth, some of them, they said that there is a case lately they would even take injection to have twins, and also know people that travel to specify the gender of the baby, but it wasn't successful. So there is also this factor. Recommendation suggestion. I'm trying to make my presentation very short, so let's other to give us more information about this their research and their ideas. So awareness level, they asked to conduct national awareness campaign, including several programs on media, education, culture, activities. NGOs has to do different awareness campaign in this field. Financial level, address set of financial support policies for the cost of marriage, housing, cost of parenting and children, including additional education and health support. Work-family balance policies is very important to introduce a set of policies to address full work-family balance framework, including revising leave policy, childcare arrangement, flexible working arrangement. Health aspect, as I said, we are still looking at these issues. In quantitative phase, we will look more and in this particularly factor, because it's very important and it's raised too much in our qualitative phase. And thank you very much for listening to this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharifa. This was very, very interesting and really covers a broad range of measures and a broad range of interventions, and again underlines the importance of the work which the government of Qatar and of course the Qatar Foundation and the Difi specifically is doing in the area of identifying new and interesting approaches to address the issues of low fertility, both from the scientific perspective perspective and the social policy perspective. I would like now to invite my old friend Loay Shabane, the Regional Director of Arab States at UNFPA, United Nations Agency for Sexual and Reproductive Health, to introduce his views and ideas about the issues of low fertility. Again, Dr. Shambane has held a number of high profiles, national and international public service positions. He's been served as a chief statistician of Palestine and served also in UNDP and many other agencies, and lately has been a regional director for United Nations Population Fund in Arab States. Loay, floor is over to you to provide the perspectives from a broader Arab region perspective and understanding how we approach these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramiz. Thanks, Difi, and thanks for Qatar Parent Mission for organizing this very important and also very timely event. Low fertility is something that is coming to the Arab region very soon, and definitely we were going to start. It will start its entry point to the region from the GCC countries. Before I start my presentation, I would like to have two pleas. The first one: don't try to blame women for low fertility, because this is something historical. It will happen anyway for any society. This is a trend that's coming, and we have to live with low fertility. So we have to see how we can adapt our social policies in order to respond to a situation that is going to take place anyway. As rightly mentioned by Dr. Sharifa, this is individual perception, and people tend to have less children to enjoy their life better. And the other plea is that governments should not try to intervene in reversing the trend, because they will not succeed, and they will distort the population structure, which will have a longer term perspective and impact that will cost a lot of efforts, money, and generations to fix. And we have some countries who have gone through this, like China, where they are still now trying to fix what they have did in the past. So I will skip some of the slides. That's trivial, and that's in the literature, because I think some of it has been touched by Dr. Sharifa, and also some of it is already known. Just I will pass through that to focus on very specific messages. So as I said, demographic transition is in the literature. It's a theory, and it will happen anyway. It happens provoked by the changes in the maternal mortality, child mortality. Therefore, it is something is going to happen, and the decline in the fertility will happen, and the aging of the population is going to happen anyway. It takes time, a longer time in some cases, and shorter time in other cases. Now, if we look at the association or the correlation between fertility and education, we can see very strong association for education. But we cannot blame people and say, if you are get more educated, you will have lower fertilities, and then we would like to blame education. No, there is other policies that uses the dividend of the population and the dividend of gender that helps the maximization of the benefits of the situation and live with the fertility as it goes. When do we consider there is low fertility? the replacement rate is 2.1. When the fertility rate is above 2.1, we are in higher fertility. If it is below 1.3 or 1.4, then we consider the country has a low fertility. Around 2 or 2.1 is the replacement threshold, where generation will be replaced by a same size generation. So if we look at the Arab region, take into consideration these thresholds, we will see that while the fertility has gone through in the 50s to the 20s, from around 70 to less than 3, from 70 to 3, we can see also that most of the Arab countries, or all Arab countries, the fertility trend is going down. And UAE is standing around 1.4, and the rest are higher than that. So we cannot consider any Arab country today is having a low fertility, but the GCC countries are approaching this. Therefore, starting from now, thinking how we can draw policies and think to develop programs and policies that will absorb this situation that's coming in the few coming years is a very timely intervention. So is low fertility a real problem? Is a real challenge? Is it something that we can reverse? This is the important question. Can we reverse? Most probably the answer is no. Because at the end of the day, we are speaking about human rights. It is individual rights. The number of children that couples would like to have, it is an individual right, and we cannot, as governments, as international community, impose on people and intervene in their choices. What we can do is to provide them with skills, provide them with information, provide them with awareness, to have evidence-based, informed decisions, but we cannot decide on their behalf. To this morning, I have launched in the Arab region the SWAP report, the State of World Population report, and the theme was bodily autonomy, which speaks about the individual right for every human being to decide if they want to have children or not, if they want to marry or not, if they want to when to get married, with whom, and so on and so forth. Therefore, it is very important to focus our policy interventions on how we can maximize the benefits, the powers in the economy, and the powers in the population to the benefit of the population without intervening in the individual rights. Because low fertility, first of all, cannot be addressed vertically. It has to be through an integrated package of socio-demographic economic policies. Because it has demographic linkages. Whenever fertility goes down, population is getting aged, the economy is getting aged, and therefore social, economic, and demographic matters needs to be linked together, and we have to look at it at the different levels. Of course, there are other challenges that interact with low fertility that has to be considered when we are thinking of the policies. For example, there are economic implications on the changes in fertility that leads to the changes in the population structure. The demographic changes have evoked alarmist predictions on the future: retirement, the age of retirement, the cost of pensions, and so on and so forth. Therefore, these issues needs to be looked at in integrated matter, and to ensure that the way how we are handling the fertility from policy angle is focusing on the changes that could be taken as a consequence for the individual right. What we can do, we can work on the gender dividend, which is one of the important aspects, policy aspects, that uses the power, the missed power in countries like the Arab region, where the investment in women and adolescent girls is an important entry point to give equal opportunity for women and men in the society, and to use this power to substitute the impact that happens through the low fertility. Also, we need to focus on the individual level. Therefore, we need to start from the family and the options that we put, and alternatives and infrastructure that we put to in order to handle the low fertility, which some of the issues that has been mentioned by Dr. Sharifa shed the light on the services to make the decision to have more children easy for the couples, in terms of the cost of the raising the children, the ensuring that having more children will not limit the aspiration of the woman to achieve her potential, and keep not to have choices either to get married and have children, or to go for work. So all these issues that could help couples to feel that having additional kid is not a big deal, because there is an important infrastructure around this issue, and to show that the couples are able to take informed decisions and to use the public policies and public infrastructure as a sort of enabler to reduce the decline in the fertility at all. Some takeaways that we have learned from the experiences of UNFPA in other places: access to a quality labor market, access to quality services, access to a good education. A good education is an important aspect to ensure that we are able to make the gender dividend. Support a conducive environment for mobilizing partnership, space for civil society, women, youth, private sector, and innovative solutions to maximize the powers in the society is also a very important matter. Investment in data is very important, so that we are able to study very well the situation on the ground. To conclude, I have a few remarks to say. The first one: although population aging driven by fertility brings important challenge, we should not forget that longer lives are the result of improved living conditions and the population, and fewer children, and to exercise their rights. Rights are very important. Second point: the long-term and sustainable solution that involves a range of measures. We cannot study fertility vertically, but it has to be in a collective measures that handles the individual, society, and it also focus on the rights of people that they can choose their own rights on an informed basis. Fundamentally, population dynamics should be taken into account when discussing the issue related to the social and population policies, so that social and economic policies, so that economic policies are aligned.
I think we lost Luay, Dr. Ramos.
I think we might have lost him for a moment. Can you hear me? Yes, I think Luay was concluding already his recommendations. And I think he made a very interesting connection, Dr. Sharifa, to what you were saying in terms of policies and a value proposition which we're bringing on the table towards the rights position and towards the individual choices which families and couples make. And as they make them, we really need to make sure that whether we are talking about the reversals or we're talking about the enabling that individual choice, that we remain in support of what really families want and what they really want to see as the best choice for the number of their children and their development. And putting that in perspective, I would like now to introduce our speaker, Christopher Murray. Is the chair and the professor of health metrics. I think someone, Luay, maybe you can mute yourself now. Thank you very much. So it's my pleasure now to, I think you disconnected at the last moment, Luay, and I'm not sure if there was any additional point you wanted to make, but I kind of concluded it and brought it. No, thank you so much. Thank you. In the connection what was Dr. Sharifa was talking about. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Christopher Murray, who I had an honor to work with in my previous work with UNFPA, and he's a very well-known, worldwide known scientist. So he's authored 16 books, many book chapters, and more than 420 journal articles. Professor Murray is the chair and the professor of health metrics sciences and director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington. He is the founder of the Global Burden of Disease GBD approach, a systemic effort to quantify the comparative magnitude of health loss due to diseases, injuries, and risk factors, various risk factors. Dr. Murray had a very long and distinguished career in health metrics and also demographic research. I know you have focused recently in some interesting studies on the aging and demographic transition which the countries are experiencing. It's a great pleasure to have you, Chris, today on the panel, and floor is yours.
Thank you, Rami. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to the hosts for this opportunity to talk about our work on low fertility. I will talk briefly about some of our findings on what the future trajectory of fertility might be. And for those who are interested, there was a paper published last year that gives quite a bit more detail in a journal called The Lancet, it's shown here. So in this work, and its ongoing work, we have been developing scenarios for future population. And of course, future population is driven by what happens to fertility, what happens to mortality, and what happens to migration. And I think at the highest level, the trajectory of population, both the numbers and the age structure, which is so important, is at the heart almost entirely driven by fertility trends. Now, you can make up for low fertility with, in-migration, and that certainly has been an important factor in some countries. But in the long term, it's really fertility that determines at the global level and the regional level population numbers. And in fact, it's not in the long run for what happens in countries, middle, high-income countries particularly, It's really what happens to fertility when it drops below replacement. And the previous speaker talked about replacement. It's roughly around 2.1 children per woman. And it matters a lot whether the fertility level that women choose in situations, in more advanced countries, higher income, middle, high income countries, if that's 1.5 or 1.3 or 2, and it makes an enormous difference in the long run. And as the two previous speakers have pointed out, there's a very strong association with two factors around fertility. There's obviously many cultural factors that also go into fertility choice, but two factors explain 85% of all variation in the last 70 years across all countries in fertility levels. And that is women's educational attainment and access to reproductive health services. And when both of those get to a high level, let's say 15 or 16 years of schooling for women, and access, 90% or higher access to reproductive health services, what we find is that the average level of fertility drops below 1.5. It can go very low, like in Beijing at around about 1, or China as a country is running probably in the 1.15 right now. But on average, it's going to be below 1.5. And that alone is enough to really make a big difference for the fertility. Now, can you see my slides? I think someone's saying they're not advancing. Yes, okay. We should be on a slide that says population shifts from now to 2100. So hopefully you are seeing the slides. So in our assessment, our reference scenario, what we think is most likely going to happen, world population will peak in about the 2060s and will peak at about from reaching up a peak level in around 2065 perhaps, and then decline from there on. And that decline will be, if you compare now to the end of the century, we expect the population of sub-Saharan Africa to go up by about 2 billion and the population of Asia to decrease over that period. And here's a more visual way to see that by region. And that peak in world population around about 2065 is really driven by this issue of below replacement fertility. And in sub-Saharan Africa, it's the exception where there's still till the end of the century, fertility rates will stay above replacement and population will keep growing. So what does this mean at the country level? Well, in 1950, 5 countries had declining population and below replacement fertility. In 2020, we have about 100 countries in the world at replacement fertility or less, and 30 of those countries have population numbers that are declining. And the difference is both the lag between when you get to replacement, it takes about a generation for population numbers to start to decline, and then those that can compensate by having in-migration. By the end of the century, we expect 180 countries to be below replacement, and about 170 countries will have declining population, despite efforts to bring in migrants. And here's another way to visualize that. What I've been talking about is the blue line, which is what we think is most likely to occur, given rising education of women, increasing reproductive health service access, rising economic attainment. All of those factor into our model. The model that we have for population and fertility is not time determining how many children women choose to have. It is actually the drivers behind that. That's education, access to reproductive health services, economic growth. And you can see, because of those associations, you can see a range of different scenarios. For example, if we actually met the SDG goals for met need and educational attainment, you would actually get the orange line, where population globally might peak as early as 2050, and world population could be as low as 6 billion by the end of the century. So it really makes a big difference what happens to the status of women and educational attainment. Now, when you put those together, what we find is that the global population pyramid, and this is much more extreme when we look at select countries, but for the whole globe, we start to shift to this inverted population pyramid, where there's more people in age group 60 than 55, et cetera, all the way down. This inverted population pyramid is already starting to occur in many high-income places, and is beginning this inversion in China. So it really is quite advanced in many places already. What does this mean for society? I think that some people, particularly concerned about the climate, view peaking of world population as a very good thing. And there are many advantages to global population coming down. The challenge for societies, however, is that this is happening with this shift to an inverted population pyramid. And in some societies, that is so extreme that you will have more 80-year-olds than there will be newborns, as an example. And that has many repercussions in terms of economic growth, in terms of fiscal space for societies. How do you fund Social Security and health insurance? Where will innovation in the economy come from? And here's one way to think about this. Here's working age population, and this is the World Bank's definition of working age from 20 to 64. One of the key policy issues could be extending the work period. That it turns out, not solve the problem in the long run. It's a useful temporizing measure, but it doesn't really make a big difference when you look at things over decades. But basically, working age population in some parts of the world are going to be declining starting quite soon. China, for example, working age population has already started to decline. And you get pretty dramatic changes. Now, when you translate that working age population and take into account IMF or OECD forecasts of economic productivity, you can translate these demographic changes into changes in the size of economies. And what you see is, for example, that we expect China to become the world's largest economy, but it will no longer sustain that position later in the century because of the enormous decline in their population that is coming. And you can see other countries such as Nigeria growing very substantially to perhaps being in the top 10 economies in the world by the end of the century, largely because of demographic factors. And so you can look at this diagram and see what might be. Of course, this is long-range economic forecasts are very tricky, but there is a strong interplay between this inverted population pyramid and how economies will fare in the coming century. So just to recap what this means, and for setting the agenda in a sense, is that the number of countries below replacement and with declining population in our numbers is the bright green line. And just for comparison, the UN population division's numbers aren't that different in this metric. In terms of countries with below replacement and declining population, that's the light blue line. And we're at this inflection point where the number of countries that have below replacement fertility and declining population is going to, by everybody's assessment, dramatically increase in the next decades. So this is a very broad-based problem, not yet one for sub-Saharan Africa, but pretty much a problem for everybody else, and one for which there's really only 3 strategies, and there's many, many details. but they can be put together in three large categories for strategies to manage low fertility. First, and we've heard, very detailed thoughts about this, which is supporting women in both pursuing the careers they want and having children. And that's things like work-life balance, familial leave, both for mothers and for fathers, making it easier for women to, childcare services, a package of strategies that have been deployed, most notably in Northern Europe, to support women in both having children and pursuing careers. And the empirical results so far there have been that some places like Sweden have seen a 0.2 increase in the TFR through that package of strategies. Notably, some countries like Japan and Singapore and Taiwan have tried similar packages, but those have not been successful in those countries to raise the TFR. So there may be quite a cultural component as well to whether these support packages will work in different settings. The second strategy is various ways to create positive financial incentives for having two or more children. Countries have had direct payments, tax rebates. China is considering, taxing those that don't have more than one child, or at least that's a policy that's been debated. And so, they're very much a set of strategies that have been used. The literature so far does not suggest that these have large effects, but I think the counter to that is that the magnitude of the financial incentives that have been used in different societies have been relatively modest. And nobody has really tried very large financial incentives. Does not mean they'll work, but that is still something that many people have been discussing. And then the third strategy to avoid not low population, but to avoid declining population, low fertility, but to avoid declining population, has been migration policies, encouraging migrants. This has been most successfully used by Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the US as examples, and have managed to sustain the working population and sustain economic growth, although there has been clearly a lot of political debate in the US and a number of European countries that have also used migration, where there has been political turmoil and debate about having liberal migration policies. So it is not without its own consequences. And so I think the way to think about managing low fertility is in these three categories. As the speaker before me pointed out, fertility will go down, and it's very unlikely, as long as women's rights are respected, that we are going to see, at least in the short to medium term, replacement fertility. I think it's really about mitigating the effects of the inverted population pyramid and managing that social transition. In the long range, it is a fundamental challenge to humans on planet Earth, because if you go out past 2100, global population will just keep declining continuously. So at some point, we will have to figure out how to get to replacement, but that's a longer term consideration. Thank you. I think Ramiz may be frozen.
Ramiz, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Murray, for this excellent presentation and those really interesting policy choices that you are proposing in the end of your presentation, and really talking about, what I particularly wanted to note is that it to the SDGs and what we want to have in terms of the global dividend, but then really bringing it down to the policy choices, and finally completing the circle with the migration point, because it's not just about the choices, it's also about government policies and employment and ability to sustain the economy and pensions, I guess, and on the social welfare for those aging societies where we need to make sure that the economy continues to produce. Now, I would like to remind participants that the questions should be posted in the chat box, and I'm trying to see if there are any questions over there right now. But please, colleagues, feel free to post questions in the chat box. In the meantime, I wanted to ask. Maybe panelists, if in this debate which we have now made today, from the issues of the policy choices into the current situation, we have a question now: what are the reasons for the inverse correlation between the income and the fertility rates? There was several of the speakers today have mentioned the linkage that better the family is doing, more empowered the woman is, so less she's inclined to have the children. The high income countries with high education and GDP, the less fertility rates are. Are these unintended consequences, association with introduction of the policies targeting to increase fertility rates? Any views? I don't know, Dr. Sharifa, what do you think about it?
Okay, I will answer the question, little bit of the question, then I will give the panelists, sure they have more input in that more than me. Relate to what we present in our finding and the research, that you will see that when there is more income, that's mean like man and woman, they are working, both of them. So that's make them busy with work, and they will try to have less children to can balance between their work and their family. Also, the education, we will see that with the higher income countries, there is more awarenesses and education. So the awarenesses also focus in the importance of the quality, not the quantity. So you will see that these countries will prefer, or couples in these countries prefer to focus on the quality, so they feel it's difficult for them. Also, what I mentioned in our study, the lifestyle and the freedom and the joining that the couples now in these kind of countries, they want to enjoy their life, they want to travel and to have luxury things, so that's made them think to have less children. This is what I have from our finding. But I can give the mic for my colleague to answer the question if they have more to add.
Thank you. Chris, what is your take on that question?
I think that's a core issue, that essentially what we're observing is that when women get educational opportunities, they are choosing to, at least for a number of years, pursue careers and do things other than having children. So they delay childbirth, and then end up, having. And so I think there is this fundamental point that when women get opportunities, they prefer to have fewer children. And that's sort of at the heart of that relationship. It is such a strong, consistent finding, country by country, decade by decade, that it really, I think, has to be a causal association and not just an association.
Interesting. Loai, where do you think we how we can address those matters. There's another question which is coming, and I do believe that both yourself and maybe Professor Murray can answer that. Do you believe in the context of this COVID-19 also, and in addition to that, our region, for instance, is so much affected by the conflict? Do you think that financial burden and the difficulty which the families are experiencing may reverse some of these trends, and or do you think because of that financial burden, people will decide not to have children either because they don't have? So what is the dualistic relationship here? This hardship and what we're observing? Yeah.
Okay, let me agree with Professor Murray that it is causal relation. One leads to another, because if they have less children, they can have more savings, and then their income will and welfare level will be higher, and the vice versa. And COVID, I am afraid, is taking us in reverse trend on this. According to the recent research that has been done by UNFPA, there are increasing number of unintended pregnancies took place during COVID in a number of Arab countries. Therefore, the impact of COVID is not really yet clear how it will affect the situation. But with what we know directly now, with COVID, a number of family planning programs have stopped and weakened. And there were warnings that after this pandemic, in a few years, we might see in some of the countries baby boom because of the changes of the priorities of the governments, moving from sexual reproductive health services into fighting the pandemic. But the relationship, yes,
would there be unintended consequences of policies to introduce the stimulation of fertility? What could be the outcome of those policies? Because we really are in uncharted waters. We don't really know. So I don't know who of you would want to take I don't know, Dr. Sharifa,
okay.
if you.
Okay,
Loai,
let me take
Loai,
one part, and I'm sure Dr. Sharifa and Professor Murray can shed the other dimensions. I would like to make one part. Any policy that do forceful measures, impose on people, will have negative consequences in the future, and the history has shown this. All programs if the government is trying to control the population or to control the growth or to minimize the growth in order to give the economy a breath to improve, all these policies need to be human rights based. We need to make sure all the time that this should be an individual right, because all the policies that has imposed on people through the intensive, whether through cutting the services, public services after a certain number of children, all these has proven to be failed. Therefore, always we need to provide the best environment for the couples to make informed decisions.
Thank you very much, Loai. And I 100% agree with you. But I think the perspective here is also, as we look at the human rights, the low fertility situation also can pose a human rights dilemma. I don't know, Dr. Sharifa, what are your views about that dimension before I go also to Professor Murray?
For us, because if I will talk from family perspective, and from what we're facing in Qatar, we always look at raising fertility rates. So all the issues here. So we're trying to advocate for different policies that's supporting that. And these policies already, even supporting growing up the children in quality ways. So spending quality time with your children. This will protect them from different destructive behavior and psychological problems. So here I will talk about my field again. So these policies, individual will also support in some way. So I think for us to increase, these policies can work, what we asked for, and it will increase our fertility rate, inshallah, if we will implement this kind of policy to support family to live better life. But still, we have to do different research related to that, because you cannot say that this might happen without you have evidence. So still we don't have evidence for that. But at least it's what is policies that support the
in really looking into these family matters from the rights perspective and the social responsibility perspective is something we admire, and we really think it is a very good policy. Unfortunately, it's not the case all over the world. We have different practices in different places, and we wish to promote maybe some of those good examples which Qatar has put in place also for the larger Middle East and the Arab world. But I want to talk to turn back to Professor Murray, because I think we discussed these matters before. The low fertility scenario does pose certain challenges and difficulties in that respect. What are your views?
No, I mean, I think low fertility has broad economic, fiscal, and even social ramifications. I think it's very hard for any of us to imagine what it would be like to live in a society with a fully inverted population pyramid, where there's many more 80-year-olds than there are newborns, as an example, and that's where we're headed in some places in this century. But I think there's the consequences of that are very great. In the economic literature, Keynes, way back in the 1930s, wrote an interesting paper warning of the perils of low fertility on the economy, and traced out many, many different pathways through which that can have an economic effect. That's more recently being caught up by other economists at Stanford and elsewhere, highlighting that there are perhaps economic risks that we haven't fully taken on board, that even per capita income might go down as if we really get a truly declining population. On the question about policies to address low fertility, could we overshoot, which I think is what one of the questions was, that's a very interesting idea. I think there is a theory or a view out there that once societies like Taiwan or Singapore or now Korea and Japan get to low fertility, and that is sustained for a period, it appears extremely difficult to reverse that. And part of that may be just a major change in cultural norms, that it becomes the norm to have one child. I think there were people in China that thought when the one-child policy was reversed, there would be a big upswing in fertility, and there was for about 18 months. And now, as I'm sure you've seen, fertility is still on this very steady trajectory down, despite all the policy breaks being removed. So there is a real issue there of how much can you reverse it? Now, could we overshoot? Perhaps, but I don't think we've got any indication yet that that's a risk.
Thank you, Professor. And I think I know that we have run out of time, but there are still questions coming in. So I want to make justice to the great interest which this discussion has provoked. So the question is about the low fertility in Egypt, and it says, if low fertility is linked really to the increased education level. So the argument is being made that how the situation in some middle-income countries like Egypt can be explained, where women are involved in all sectors of work, and yet the country doesn't suffer from low fertility. Obviously, fertility in Egypt is quite high. So, any specific comments on what we see demographically and specifically in terms of women's choices in Egypt these days? Anybody wants to volunteer to take that question?
Let me jump on Egypt.
Sure.
Egypt is a big country, and women are part of the labor force. And historically, Egyptian women were the first to go out of the home to the labor market. But if we go to the countryside and the Upper Egypt, the situation is not similar. So in Egypt, the aggregations and the averages hide a lot of information inside. And now, in the past few years, the government came to a conclusion that without handling fertility and going in the opposite direction of Qatar in terms of fertility, they will not be able to see positive change in the welfare of society. Therefore, the government now is advocating hardly to have less children so that they can have some more welfare situation in the country is going up because the government is trying to stretch the economy to the maximum and to handle the population factor so that the dividend could be seen in terms of the economic return on the welfare levels in Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luai, and that explains the nuance of the differences that Egypt has between the rural and urban area, and in that is level of the education. Maybe I don't know if Dr. Sharifa has any reaction to this, or Chris, you want to comment? No, Chris, no. Well, maybe. Since we have kind of run out of time, and you know what, I can have this conversation for quite a long time, particularly as I'm sitting in the evening in Kabul and my connection is improving, and I'm really enjoying that conversation. And I know that it's not the time of the IMSAC yet, so we probably can continue for some time until we do so. Nevertheless, I do want to give every panelist a concluding remark opportunity, because I think today was an amazing, and this amazing discussion, because we went through the choices made in Qatar and the research being made in Qatar. We looked at the region and we came to a global perspective, and we really made a full 360 coverage of that matter. And I do believe this is the new world we will be living in. And this is the reality which the world will be facing in the next 10, 15 years. So I do believe CPD itself may benefit from more of those discussions and more of those debates. I'm really appreciative to the fact that today is happening. So let me first turn to the panelists for some maybe concluding last words, and then we'll close that panel. But I do really hope that's not the end of the conversation. So Dr. Sharifa, first your turn is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just want to focus in the health sector, because this is one of the things that even we don't mention it too much. I think the lifestyle, the diet, it's impacted in the fertility rate and the rate of marriage. So it's very important to look at this aspect more. So really we want to focus more in our research, especially in quantitative phase, more in that, and you will see inshallah next year. I hope we can present something more in details in that. And thank you very much. It's really a good session, and I would like, inshallah, we will continue to meet more and talk more about these issues, and to to really advocate for more policies to support both situation in different countries that they want to.
Don't blame women for low fertility. We have to keep investing in women education, and we have to keep investing in their sexual and reproductive health and their human capital. This is one. Second, any policies that countries would like to make have to be based on human rights. At the end of the day, it's an individual right. And third, we have to coexist with low fertility and to try to maximize the missed opportunities in the community, particularly gender dividend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luai. And Chris, over to you for any concluding remarks and reflections from the today discussion.
My only comment is that I think the way we will find in the societies where this is a challenge solutions is by this type of discussion. For too long, the focus in the world around on the demography side has been about high fertility. And it's only by having a more robust discussion about what works and what doesn't to tackle this. Now, half the countries of the world in the below replacement fertility category, soon to be the vast majority of countries over the coming decades. And so just to congratulate the hosts for the foresight in trying to grapple with what is going to be one of the most important issues for societies in the coming generations.
Thank you very much, Professor Murray. And if I can just say one thing, I really hope that this is not the end of that conversation, it's just the beginning. And I also believe that it is such an important place, also the dialogue and thinking of what is now happening in Qatar and the breaking through social policy research and ideas. And I really would like to joining you in congratulating the government of Qatar and Qatar Foundation and Difi specifically in carrying this work forward. But there could be very amazing opportunities also for joining forces. Also the Institute for Health Metrics Sciences, which you're leading, and kind of trying to see where this whole thing is coming and bringing that dialogue to the CPD and to our forums, because really we need to talk about that. And I think the world is moving fast, and bringing that knowledge and understanding on the forefront is what today has been done with an amazing leadership of our hosts from Qatar. And of course, thank you very much, Professor Murray, for always bringing that academic edge and the sharp thinking to our political debate. And I think that's where we really find the value of today's panel. I really want to thank everybody. My apology for some connection glitches which we experience all. We are living in the IT world these days, but it was an amazing event, and I really, really appreciate your insights, your participation, and your time. Thank you so much, and until see you soon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.